1. Gilbert U-238 Atomic Energy Lab. Back in the 1950s, America looked at nuclear technology and thought, you know who needs this? Children. Enter the Gilbert U-238 Atomic Energy Lab. This wasn't a toy rocket or a chemistry set that made colorful foam. It actually contained real radioactive materials, real uranium samples. For kids, the idea was educational. The execution was something between a science project and a supervillain origin story. Young, aspiring scientists could use genuine radioactive substances and a Geiger counter to perform experiments right in their bedroom. Imagine being a parent in 1951. Honey, where's Timmy? Upstairs. Doing homework? No, he's handling uranium. The craziest part is that nobody thought this sounded alarming. America was in its nuclear honeymoon phase. Radiation was treated like a magical ingredient that could solve every problem from energy shortages to bad moods. Today, if a toy contains a battery that's slightly difficult to remove, it gets recalled. Back then, they handed kids radioactive rocks and said, "Have fun, champ." Nothing says childhood innocence quite like accidentally learning nuclear physics before learning long division. 2. Lawn darts. If you've ever looked at a giant metal spike and thought, that should definitely be part of a family game night, congratulations, you would have loved lawn darts. The concept was beautifully simple. Players tossed heavy darts with razor-sharp metal tips through the air toward targets on the ground. Essentially, it was horseshoes combined with the possibility of emergency surgery. Manufacturers marketed it as wholesome backyard entertainment. The packaging showed smiling families laughing in the sunshine. What the packaging didn't show was Uncle Bob sprinting across the yard while a metal projectile descended from orbit. The darts weren't small, either. These things looked like miniature medieval weapons. If a regular dart is a pencil, a lawn dart was a spear with commitment issues. Predictably, accidents piled up. Thousands of injuries were reported over the years. Children, adults, and innocent bystanders discovered that gravity turns flying metal objects into very persuasive arguments. Yet for years, they remained legal. Apparently, regulators needed overwhelming evidence that launching weighted spikes into crowds wasn't ideal recreation. It's amazing how long it took society to conclude that javelin roulette might not be suitable for family barbecues. 3. Radium beauty products. The 1920s were an incredible decade. Jazz was booming, cars were everywhere, and somehow people decided radioactive makeup was the future of skincare. Companies began selling radium-infused creams, powders, soaps, toothpaste, and beauty treatments. Advertisements promised youthful skin, glowing beauty, and renewed vitality. Technically, they weren't lying about the glowing part. Some products literally contained radioactive materials because businesses believed radiation had miraculous health benefits. If a tiny amount of something sounded scientific, marketers assumed more must be better. Women paid premium prices to rub radioactive substances directly onto their faces. Think about modern skincare ads. They promise hydration, collagen support, and reduced wrinkles. Imagine one saying, "Now with added radiation." The marketing departments of the era treated radium like today's influencers treat antioxidants. Nobody fully understood it, but everyone was convinced it was magical. Unfortunately, radiation doesn't care about beauty trends. Long-term exposure caused severe health problems, and the dream of atomic skincare quickly turned into a cautionary tale. The truly absurd part is that customers thought they were buying youth and elegance. Instead, they were essentially paying extra to participate in a science experiment nobody should have approved. Turns out the secret to eternal beauty was not, in fact, nuclear technology. 4. Asbestos snow for Christmas decorations. For decades, Americans wanted their Christmas displays to look magical. Fake snow-covered store windows, Christmas villages, and living rooms across the country. The problem? A shocking amount of that fake snow was made from asbestos. Yes, the same material that would later become famous for lawsuits, health warnings, and terrifying TV commercials once helped families create festive holiday memories. Manufacturers loved asbestos because it was white, fluffy, fire-resistant, and cheap. Basically, it checked every box on the Christmas decoration wish list. Parents would sprinkle it across tree branches while children helped spread it around the house. Every shake sent tiny fibers floating through the air like holiday cheer with a legal disclaimer. Imagine decorating for Christmas in 1955. "Mom, the snow is beautiful." "Thanks, sweetheart. Try not to inhale too much of it." The irony is incredible. Families used asbestos because they were worried about candles causing fires. In other words, they solved one danger by introducing a completely different danger. It's the only Christmas product that managed to turn winter wonderland into future class action lawsuit. Nothing captures the holiday spirit quite like hanging stockings while unknowingly filling your lungs with industrial insulation. 5. The Aqua Dots. Toy disaster. Most children's toys come with simple risks. Maybe you'll step on one barefoot. Maybe you'll lose a piece under the couch. Aqua Dots somehow raised the stakes dramatically. The toy consisted of tiny, colorful beads that kids arranged into patterns. Add water, and the beads would stick together to create fun designs. Sounds harmless enough. Except one of the chemicals used in the coating could metabolize into a substance similar to a powerful sedative if swallowed, which became a problem because the target audience was children, human beings famous for putting random objects into their mouths. Several kids became seriously ill after ingesting the beads. Some required hospitalization. A few even fell into comas. Think about how spectacularly wrong a toy has to go before it graduates from arts and crafts to emergency medicine. Parents thought they were buying a creative activity. Instead, they accidentally purchased a chemistry experiment disguised as a toy set. The recall came quickly once authorities realized what was happening. But it's still remarkable that somewhere during product development, nobody stopped and asked the obvious question: should our craft beads transform into something resembling a pharmaceutical product if eaten? Apparently, that discussion never happened. 6. Clackers, the toy that fought back. The 1970s gave us disco, bell-bottoms, and one of the most aggressive toys ever sold: clackers. The concept was simple. Two hard acrylic balls were attached to a string. Players swung them up and down so they smashed together repeatedly. That's it. A toy whose entire purpose was creating controlled collisions at high speed. Unfortunately, the balls occasionally shattered during use. When they broke, sharp plastic fragments launched across rooms like tiny missiles. Children didn't just play with clackers, they survived clackers. Parents would hear loud, cracking noises from the backyard and wonder whether the kids were having fun or reenacting medieval warfare. The best part is that manufacturers kept making them harder and stronger to prevent breakage, which sounds reasonable until you realize they were essentially upgrading recreational blunt force weapons. Eventually, injuries piled up: broken teeth, facial cuts, eye injuries, you name it. Modern toys arrive wrapped in enough safety warnings to launch a space mission. Meanwhile, clackers basically came with the message, "Here's two projectiles attached to a string. Good luck." It was less a toy and more a childhood reflex test disguised as entertainment. 7. Lead-painted toys. Today, if a toy contains anything remotely questionable, manufacturers panic. In earlier decades, however, companies looked at lead, a toxic heavy metal, and thought, this would make an excellent paint ingredient. Lead paint appeared on countless toys because it produced bright, vibrant colors and lasted a long time. Unfortunately, it also happened to be poisonous. Children naturally handle toys constantly. They touch them, chew them, drop them, lick them, and generally interact with them in ways that horrify safety engineers, which meant toxic paint and curious children were spending a lot of time together. The truly wild part is how common it was. Entire toy collections could contain lead-painted pieces sitting peacefully in nurseries across America. Imagine opening a toy catalog in the 1950s. This truck comes in red, blue, green, and trace amounts of toxic metal. Parents worried about scraped knees and dirty clothes, while the actual danger was sitting on the toy shelf looking colorful and innocent. The eventual bans and regulations saved countless children from exposure. But looking back, it's astonishing how long society accepted the idea that a child's favorite toy could double as a chemistry hazard. Sometimes the brightest colors came with the darkest fine print. 8. The Easy Bake Oven that wasn't always easy. The Easy Bake Oven is remembered as one of the most beloved toys ever created. A miniature oven that allowed kids to bake real treats. Adorable. Mostly. Early versions worked using actual heat generated by powerful incandescent light bulbs. The oven became hot enough to cook small cakes, brownies, and cookies. Which sounds charming until you remember that children were operating it. Over the years, thousands of burn injuries were reported. Small fingers occasionally found themselves far closer to the heating elements than manufacturers intended. One version became particularly controversial when children got their hands trapped inside the oven opening. Suddenly, family baking time started involving emergency room visits. It's amazing how confidently adults handed kids a functioning heating appliance and assumed everything would work out perfectly. Imagine pitching it today. We've created a toy that teaches cooking. Great. It also generates enough heat to cause second-degree burns. Maybe lead with that part next time. To be fair, millions of children used easy bake ovens safely and created wonderful memories. But it's still hilarious that one of history's most iconic toys was essentially a miniature kitchen appliance marketed to people who still needed permission to cross the street. 9. Cigarettes marketed to children. There was a time when toy stores, candy companies, and cigarette manufacturers looked at childhood and thought, what if we blurred all the lines? For decades, companies sold candy cigarettes that looked remarkably similar to real cigarette brands. Some even came in miniature versions of famous packaging, complete with logos and designs that made kids feel like tiny executives heading to a board meeting. Children would walk around pretending to smoke while adults laughed and took photos. Because apparently the phrase future customer acquisition strategy hadn't yet become controversial. Even stranger, actual tobacco advertising frequently appeared in places where children saw it constantly. Cartoons, magazines, sporting events, cigarette brands were everywhere. Mascots looked friendlier than Saturday morning cartoon characters. Imagine a marketing meeting. Who should we target? Adults. Excellent. Let's make the ads look like they were designed by Disney. The result was an entire generation growing up around products treated less like dangerous habits and more like fashionable accessories. Today, companies get investigated if packaging appeals too much to teenagers. Back then, the strategy often seemed to be, let's make smoking look as cool as owning a bicycle. It's hard to imagine a product receiving more aggressive marketing while simultaneously being a terrible life choice. 10 DDT household sprays. Modern bug spray comes with warning labels, safety instructions, and enough fine print to qualify as a short novel. Then there was DDT. For years, this pesticide was treated like a miracle substance. It killed insects efficiently, and people became absolutely obsessed with using it. Homes were sprayed with it. Parks were sprayed with it. Sometimes children were sprayed with it. Photographs from the era show smiling kids running behind trucks releasing giant clouds of pesticide into the air. Nobody was wearing protective equipment. Nobody looked concerned. Everyone acted like they were playing in magical summer fog. Imagine explaining this to someone today. So, the chemical was designed to kill living things? Correct. And children played in it? Also correct. The confidence people had in DDT was almost impressive. Advertisements presented it as the solution to nearly every pest-related problem on Earth. The issue, well, of course, was that scientists eventually discovered the chemical wasn't nearly as harmless as everyone assumed. Environmental damage and health concerns began piling up. Suddenly, society realized that maybe turning neighborhoods into giant pesticide clouds wasn't peak innovation after all. It's one of history's greatest examples of humanity saying, "This seems fine," immediately before discovering it definitely wasn't. 11. Creepy Crawler's Hot Plate Toy. Most toy companies try to keep children away from industrial manufacturing equipment. The creators of Creepy Crawlers had a different vision. This toy allowed kids to make rubber insects by pouring liquid compounds into metal molds and heating them inside a miniature oven. Basically, it was a tiny factory disguised as a toy. Kids loved it because they could create spiders, worms, and bugs that looked surprisingly realistic. Parents loved it because, actually, many parents were probably nervous the entire time. The machine operated at temperatures hot enough to cause serious burns. Children handled metal molds, hot surfaces, and chemical compounds while pretending they were amateur inventors. It's difficult to imagine a modern focus group approving this. So, kids pour mystery liquids into heated metal trays? Exactly. And then, they remove the extremely hot molds themselves. Are we trying to manufacture toys or insurance claims? Thousands of children used Creepy Crawlers successfully, but accidents were inevitable. The toy wasn't evil. It was simply built during an era when product safety often seemed like a polite suggestion rather than a design requirement. Nothing says childhood fun quite like operating a miniature chemical processing plant after school. 12. Radioactive Radioactive drinking water. If radioactive makeup sounds crazy, wait until you hear about radioactive water. During the 1920s, a product called Radithor was marketed as a health tonic. The bottle contained water infused with radioactive elements and promised increased energy, vitality, and overall wellness. Because apparently someone looked at radiation and concluded the logical next step was drinking it. Advertisements portrayed the product as cutting-edge science. Wealthy customers embraced it enthusiastically. One of the most famous users was a businessman named Eben Byers, who consumed enormous quantities because he believed it improved his health. For a while, he felt fantastic. Then things became significantly less fantastic. The radiation gradually destroyed parts of his body, creating one of the most horrifying medical cautionary tales of the 20th century. The scandal helped expose how dangerous these products really were. Looking back, it's astonishing how easily people trusted anything labeled scientific. Today, we research vitamins, supplements, and ingredients online before buying them. Meanwhile, Radithor customers basically saw a bottle containing radioactive water and thought, finally, someone put science in a beverage. History occasionally feels like a giant experiment conducted by people who skipped the instruction manual. 13. Chemistry sets with actual dangerous chemicals. Modern chemistry kits are incredibly safe. Kids mix colorful liquids, watch harmless reactions, and learn basic science. Mid-century chemistry sets were a completely different adventure. Some kits included chemicals that today would trigger alarm bells in multiple government agencies. Strong acids, reactive compounds, and substances requiring serious supervision appeared in products marketed directly to children. The philosophy seemed simple. How can kids learn chemistry without access to real chemistry? Technically, that's a fair question. The problem is that real chemistry occasionally explodes. Young scientists eagerly conducted experiments at kitchen tables, basement workbenches, and bedroom desks. Safety goggles were often optional. Adult supervision was sometimes theoretical. Imagine opening a Christmas present and discovering enough chemicals to concern a university laboratory. Parents proudly encouraged scientific curiosity. Neighbors quietly wondered why strange smoke kept emerging from the garage. To be fair, many future scientists developed their passion through these kits. But it's still remarkable how much trust manufacturers placed in children whose decision-making process frequently included phrases like, "I wonder what happens if I mix everything together." History has repeatedly demonstrated that children absolutely will mix everything together. 14. Mercury toys and scientific gadgets. Mercury is now treated with extreme caution, for good reason. It's toxic, hazardous, and definitely not something you want spilling across your kitchen floor. Earlier generations, however, viewed mercury with the same fascination people reserve for futuristic technology. The shiny liquid metal appeared in science kits, novelty toys, educational devices, and classroom demonstrations. Children loved it because it looked magical. After all, how often do you encounter a metal that behaves like liquid silver from a science fiction movie? Kids would poke it, roll it around, divide it into smaller droplets, and generally interact with it far more than anyone would recommend today. The danger wasn't obvious. Mercury didn't explode. It didn't smell strange. It simply sat there looking beautiful and mysterious, which made it easy to underestimate. Imagine a product description reading, fun, educational, potentially toxic. Modern parents would sprint in the opposite direction. Back then, the emphasis was mostly on the fun and educational parts. It's a reminder that some of history's most dangerous products weren't terrifying at all. They were shiny, fascinating, and surprisingly good at hiding the risk. 15. Baby cages hung outside apartment windows. Sometimes history produces inventions so bizarre they sound completely fictional. Baby cages are one of them. During the early 20th century, some urban parents installed wire cages outside apartment windows so babies could spend time in fresh air, not near the window. Outside the window, the metal enclosure would literally hang several stories above busy city streets while an infant sat inside enjoying sunshine and ventilation. Supporters argued that fresh air improved children's health, particularly in crowded cities where parks weren't always accessible. The intention was surprisingly wholesome. The execution looked like something designed by a cartoon villain. Imagine walking down a city sidewalk and glancing upward. Instead of pigeons, you see babies suspended from apartment buildings. Even by historical standards, that's an ambitious parenting strategy. To be fair, many of the cages were built sturdily and used without incident. Still, the visual alone is enough to make modern safety inspectors faint. Today's parents spend weeks researching the safest car seats on the market. A century ago, some parents essentially attached a baby balcony to the side of a building and called it a day. Nothing demonstrates confidence in structural engineering quite like hanging your child several stories above traffic for a little fresh air. 16. Arsenic wallpaper. In the Victorian era, people wanted their homes to look elegant, expensive, and slightly judgmental. So manufacturers gave them beautiful green wallpaper made with arsenic-based pigments. Yes, arsenic. The poison famous for murder mysteries and suspicious cups of tea. The color was stunning, rich, fashionable, and perfect for anyone who wanted their parlor to say, "We have taste, money, and possibly chronic poisoning." The problem was that damp rooms could release toxic compounds from the wallpaper. Families spent their evenings relaxing beside walls that were quietly trying to assassinate them. Imagine inviting guests over. Lovely wallpaper. Thank you. It may be reducing our life expectancy. Nobody thought of wallpaper as dangerous. It was decoration, background. Something behind the sofa, not something capable of turning your living room into a slow-motion crime scene. The wealthy especially loved it, because nothing says sophistication like paying extra for poison in floral print. Eventually, people realized the fashionable green walls were not just dramatic. They were hazardous. Interior design has made mistakes before, but arsenic wallpaper remains one of the few trends where bad taste could literally kill you. 17. Flammable celluloid toys. Before modern plastics took over, celluloid was the exciting new material everyone loved. It was light, moldable, colorful, and perfect for dolls, combs, buttons, toys, and novelty items. It also had one tiny flaw. It could catch fire extremely easily. Celluloid was basically plastic with the survival instincts of dry newspaper. Put it near heat, flame, or a careless cigarette, and suddenly your toy collection had entered its fireworks era. Children played with dolls and rattles made from a material that could ignite with terrifying enthusiasm. Imagine a parent saying, "Here, sweetheart, enjoy this adorable baby doll. Just don't let it near a birthday candle, fireplace, stove, lamp, or the concept of warmth." The truly absurd part is that celluloid was everywhere. People used it because it looked modern and affordable. Safety was treated like an optional accessory, probably sold separately. Eventually, safer plastics replaced it, and society quietly moved on like it hadn't spent decades handing kids decorative fire starters. Some toys bring joy, some toys build imagination. Celluloid toys taught children an important lesson too. Chemistry has a temper. 18. Ford Pinto. The Ford Pinto was supposed to be a practical little car for everyday Americans. Affordable, compact, efficient. Unfortunately, it became famous for something much worse: fuel tank safety concerns that made rear-end collisions especially terrifying. The issue was that the gas tank design and placement could make the car vulnerable in crashes. In some accidents, the tank could rupture, leading to fires, which is not exactly the feature drivers look for in a family vehicle. Imagine reading the brochure. Great mileage, easy parking, may become a barbecue if hit from behind. The Pinto became a symbol of corporate cost-cutting and the dark side of product safety decisions. Internal debates, lawsuits, and public outrage turned it into one of the most infamous cars in American history. To be fair, not every Pinto burst into flames like a Hollywood stunt car, but the reputation stuck hard. Once your compact economy car becomes shorthand for corporate negligence, the marketing department has officially lost the room. The Pinto reminds us that cheap transportation is nice, but most customers prefer their savings not to come with a complimentary fireball. 19. Three-wheel ATVs. Three-wheel ATVs looked exciting in the 1970s and 1980s. They were rugged, fast, and perfect for commercials featuring dusty trails, denim jackets, and people making questionable decisions in slow motion. The problem was stability. With one wheel in front and two in back, these machines could tip over far too easily, especially during turns, bumps, or sudden maneuvers. In other words, the vehicle was designed like a tricycle, then given the attitude of a motorcycle. Children and teenagers often rode them, because apparently the phrase high-powered, unstable off-road machine did not scare parents enough yet. Accidents became common, injuries were severe. Eventually, manufacturers stopped selling new three-wheel ATVs in the United States after safety concerns became impossible to ignore. But for years, they were marketed as family fun. That's the amazing part. Not extreme danger, not wilderness roulette. Family fun. A typical ad made it look like wholesome weekend adventure. Reality sometimes looked more like a physics lesson delivered by gravel. The three-wheeler's legacy is simple. Just because something has handlebars doesn't mean it has common sense. 20. Jarts, the backyard spear game. Returns lawn darts were so dangerous they deserve another moment because the branding alone was hilarious. Jarts sounds cute, like darts went to summer camp and learned friendship. In reality, jarts were heavy-pointed missiles tossed high into the air while people stood nearby pretending this was recreation. The goal was to land them inside plastic rings on the lawn. The unofficial side quest was avoiding head trauma. They were sold as a backyard game, right alongside badminton sets and croquet mallets. The difference is badminton rarely ends with someone needing skull-related medical attention. Children were especially at risk because they didn't always understand where the darts would land. And honestly, some adults didn't either. The game's entire safety system depended on everyone paying attention, standing still, judging arcs correctly, and respecting gravity. So basically, it was doomed. Eventually, bans and recalls removed the sharp metal versions from stores. But for years, families owned them casually. They sat in garages beside bikes and folding chairs, as if launching tiny spears during a cookout was perfectly normal. Yards prove one thing: nostalgia can make anything seem innocent, even backyard artillery. 21. Leaded gasoline. Leaded gasoline may be one of the most successful bad ideas ever sold. For decades, fuel companies added lead compounds to gasoline because it helped engines run more smoothly and reduce knocking. From a mechanical perspective, it worked. From a human health perspective, it was like seasoning the air with poison. Every car burning leaded gas released toxic particles into the environment. Cities, highways, neighborhoods, and school zones were quietly coated in contamination from millions of exhaust pipes. People breathed it daily. Children were especially vulnerable. And for a long time, society treated this as the normal smell of progress. There is something deeply American about solving an engine problem by creating a public health problem and then driving coast to coast with the windows down. Gas stations sold it proudly. Drivers filled up without worry. The danger was invisible, which made it easy to ignore. Eventually, research and regulation pushed leaded gasoline out of everyday use in many countries, but the legacy remained enormous. Leaded gasoline proves that some products don't explode, burn, or bite. Some just poison everything slowly while wearing the friendly disguise of modern convenience. 22. Cocaine toothache drops. There was a time when tooth pain relief involved cocaine, not metaphorically, actual cocaine. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, cocaine appeared in medicines, tonics, lozenges, and toothache drops. Parents could buy products meant to soothe children's dental pain that contained a drug now associated with narcotics investigations and extremely nervous nightclub bathrooms. The sales pitch was simple. It numbed pain quickly. And technically, yes, cocaine does numb things. That was the problem. It worked just well enough for everyone to ignore the enormous warning siren hiding behind the medicine cabinet. Imagine a Victorian mother saying, "Little Henry's molar hurts, so I gave him something from the pharmacy. Now he's reorganizing the pantry alphabetically and talking to the wallpaper." Back then, regulation was loose, labels were vague, and pharmacies sometimes felt like chemistry experiments with cash registers. Eventually, laws caught up, and cocaine disappeared from ordinary consumer remedies. But for a while, toothache medicine wasn't just pain relief. It was dental care with a side quest. 23. Opium-based soothing syrups. Before modern pediatric medicine, exhausted parents had a terrifying little helper, soothing syrups containing opium or morphine. These products were marketed for teething, crying, coughing, and general infant fussiness, which sounds gentle until you realize the soothing part sometimes came from narcotics strong enough to sedate a grown adult. The advertisements promised peaceful babies and rested mothers. That is one way to phrase it. Another way is, we put the baby on airplane mode. Parents weren't trying to be reckless. They trusted the labels, the doctors, the newspapers, and the charming little bottles promising relief. But the doses could be dangerous, especially for infants. Imagine walking into a pharmacy and asking for something because your baby won't sleep. The clerk smiles and hands you a bottle that today would require paperwork, warnings, and probably 3 locked cabinets. These syrups are a reminder that old-fashioned remedy does not always mean wholesome. Sometimes it means grandma's medicine shelf was one police raid away from becoming evidence. 24. Flammable pajamas. Children's pajamas should have one job: keep kids comfortable while they sleep. For years, some did a bonus job: catch fire disturbingly fast. Before stronger fabric safety standards, many children's sleepwear items were made from materials that could ignite easily if exposed to open flames, heaters, stoves, or cigarettes. And remember, older homes were full of fireplaces, space heaters, gas appliances, and adults smoking like every living room was a detective movie. The result was a serious burn hazard hiding in bedtime clothing. Imagine a parent buying cute pajamas with little rockets on them, not realizing the fabric might treat an actual spark like opening night at Cape Canaveral. Eventually, stricter flammability rules changed the industry. Children's sleepwear became safer, labels improved, and manufacturers had to think harder than, well, it looks adorable. The absurd part is how long it took. Kids were literally being tucked into bed wearing fabric with the survival instincts of tissue paper. Sweet dreams, little one. Try not to stand near a lamp. 25. Metal playground equipment. Over concrete, for generations, playgrounds were less like child development spaces and more like tiny municipal obstacle courses. Slides were metal, swings were metal, monkey bars were metal. Merry-go-rounds spun fast enough to create diplomatic incidents. And underneath, often concrete, asphalt, gravel, or dirt packed harder than a courthouse bench. The message was clear: have fun, but land carefully. On hot summer days, metal slides became outdoor frying pans. Children learned physics, courage, and the exact temperature at which shorts stopped being useful protection. A kid climbing the jungle gym wasn't just playing. He was negotiating with gravity on equipment designed by someone who apparently believed childhood needed more impact testing. Modern playgrounds have soft surfaces, rounded edges, plastic components, and safety zones. Older playgrounds had rust, heat, sharp corners, and the moral philosophy of a boot camp instructor. Were they fun? Absolutely. Were they safe? Only in the sense that medieval castles also had recreational climbing opportunities. Those playgrounds built character, mostly because they removed several layers of skin first. 26. The cigarette lighter in every car. For decades, nearly every car came with a built-in cigarette lighter. Not a phone charger, not a USB port, a tiny electric heating coil designed specifically to help drivers light tobacco while operating heavy machinery at highway speeds. Think about that combination. One hand on the wheel, one hand holding a cigarette, eyes briefly off the road, open flame near upholstery, and everyone called this normal transportation. The device would heat until glowing orange, then pop out like a miniature branding iron. And it sat right there within reach of children in the back seat, because apparently cars needed a small dashboard volcano. Of course, the lighter later became useful as a power outlet, which is funny. Society accidentally invented the phone charger by first installing a cigarette ignition system in every sedan. The cigarette lighter captures an entire era of product design. Convenient? Yes. Safe? Not exactly. It was a time when cars had ashtrays in every door and seat belts were treated like optional accessories for nervous people. 27. Lead crystal glassware. Lead crystal sounds fancy because it has the word crystal in it. That helps distract from the word lead. For years, elegant decanters, goblets, and serving pieces were made with leaded glass because it looked brilliant, heavy, and expensive. The sparkle was beautiful. The weight felt luxurious. The problem was that acidic liquids, especially wine or spirits stored for long periods, could leach lead from the glass. So your classy decanter wasn't just holding brandy, it was slowly adding a surprise ingredient. Imagine a dinner party. Would you like a drink? Certainly. Excellent. It's been aging in this beautiful lead crystal decanter since Thanksgiving. Which Thanksgiving? Hard to say. The danger depended on use, length of storage, and the amount of lead. But the basic concept remains absurd. The more prestigious the glassware looked, the more suspicious it could become. Modern advice is much more cautious, especially about storing alcohol in lead crystal. It turns out elegance is wonderful, but it should not come with a toxic aftertaste. 28. Tanning beds. Tanning beds were marketed as beauty, confidence, and vacation energy without the inconvenience of actual vacation. You could walk into a salon pale and emerge looking like you had spent 2 weeks in Miami, minus the hotel bill and bad airport sandwich. The machine itself was basically a glowing coffin that blasted your skin with ultraviolet radiation. And people paid for memberships. For decades, tanning beds were promoted as glamorous and healthy-looking. Teenagers used them before prom. Adults used them before cruises. Everyone wanted that sun-kissed glow, even if the sun in question was an electric radiation drawer. The warning signs eventually became impossible to ignore. UV exposure increases skin damage and raises cancer risk, but the industry had already convinced millions that cooked skin was sophistication. Imagine explaining this to future archaeologists. They climbed inside? Yes. Voluntarily? Yes. To look healthier? Exactly. Tanning beds prove humans can turn almost anything into a beauty ritual, including lying still while lamps roast you like grocery store chicken. 29. X-ray shoe fitting machines. Shopping for shoes used to involve measuring your foot. Then somebody looked at that perfectly functional system and thought, what if we add radiation? Enter the shoe fluoroscope. For decades, shoe stores across America featured machines that allowed customers to stick their feet inside and view the bones through X-rays while trying on shoes. Kids loved them. Parents thought they were futuristic. Store employees spent entire work days standing near them. Everyone was fascinated. Nobody was asking enough questions. Imagine taking your child to buy sneakers. Instead of checking comfort, you're giving them a casual medical scan between lunch and baseball practice. The machines were marketed as scientific and modern. They made shoe shopping feel like visiting NASA. The problem, of course, was repeated radiation exposure. One X-ray wasn't necessarily alarming. Hundreds or thousands over time became a different conversation entirely. Employees received the highest exposure because they demonstrated the machines constantly. Eventually, regulators realized maybe exposing entire families to unnecessary radiation for footwear wasn't humanity's greatest innovation. It's one of the few products that transformed buying loafers into a minor nuclear event. 30. Kerosene-powered household appliances. Before electricity became universal, kerosene powered an astonishing number of household products: heaters, lamps, stoves, refrigerators. And sometimes these appliances behaved exactly like you'd expect when a flammable liquid became involved. Poor ventilation, leaks, accidental spills, and open flames created a wonderful recipe for disaster. Imagine sitting peacefully in your living room while several gallons of combustible fuel quietly occupy the same space. What could possibly go wrong? Families relied on these devices because they were practical and often the only option available. But safety standards varied wildly. Some appliances were well built. Others seemed to be assembled by a man whose primary engineering qualification was confidence. The advertisements promised convenience and modern living. They rarely mentioned that your refrigerator contained enough fuel to interest the local fire department. To be fair, millions of households used kerosene safely. Still, modern kitchens don't generally involve liquid fuel reservoirs sitting next to dinner. Progress occasionally means inventing better technology. Sometimes it simply means removing the possibility of accidentally setting the house on fire while making soup. 31. Mercury thermometers for children. For generations, nearly every household owned a mercury thermometer. It was considered accurate, reliable, and completely normal. The fact that it contained toxic liquid metal was treated as a minor detail. Parents took temperatures, shook the thermometer vigorously, and stored it in bathroom cabinets without much concern. The trouble started when one broke. Suddenly, tiny silver beads rolled across the floor like escapees from a science fiction movie. Children often found the droplets fascinating, because of course they did. It's shiny liquid metal. That's basically catnip for curious kids. Imagine trying to explain to a 6-year-old that the coolest substance they've ever seen is also something they absolutely shouldn't touch. Good luck with that. The irony is that mercury thermometers worked extremely well. Their danger only appeared when accidents happened. Unfortunately, children specialize in creating accidents from otherwise ordinary objects. Eventually, digital thermometers replaced them in most homes. Today, if a product contains mercury, warning labels appear everywhere. Back then, toxic metal lived quietly inside medicine cabinets, waiting for gravity and clumsiness to collaborate. 32. Dangerous fireworks sold like toys. Modern fireworks are heavily regulated. Older fireworks often seemed regulated by enthusiasm alone. For much of the 20th century, children could buy firecrackers, bottle rockets, cherry bombs, and various explosive devices with surprisingly little oversight. The names alone sounded like rejected military equipment. Thunder Kings, Mighty Blasters, Super Bombs. Apparently, marketing departments believed subtlety was for cowards. Every 4th of July became a nationwide experiment in risk management. Kids ran through neighborhoods carrying enough explosives to concern a demolition crew. Parents stood nearby offering safety advice that usually arrived about 3 seconds too late. The truly remarkable part is how casual everyone was. Imagine a modern store advertising products specifically designed to explode in the hands of 12-year-olds. Lawyers would emerge from nearby forests instantly. Eventually, stricter regulations arrived. But for decades, childhood entertainment involved lighting fuses and hoping your calculations were correct. Nothing captures American optimism quite like handing explosives to teenagers and trusting their judgment. 33. Dangerous baby walkers. Baby walkers seemed like a brilliant idea. Put your child inside a rolling frame and let them explore safely. The key word there was seemed. In reality, many early baby walkers transformed toddlers into tiny, high-speed chaos machines. Babies could suddenly move much faster than expected. Stairs became terrifying. Hot stoves became accessible. Sharp furniture corners became achievable goals. Parents discovered that giving an inexperienced human wheels dramatically increased both mobility and danger. Imagine taking someone with zero understanding of gravity and strapping them into a vehicle. What could go wrong? A surprising amount, as it turns out. Hospitals treated thousands of injuries associated with walkers, particularly falls down stairs. The devices often gave parents a false sense of security while giving babies an unrealistic amount of horsepower. Modern safety standards improved the design considerably. Some countries restricted them entirely. The lesson was simple. Just because a product helps a baby move doesn't mean the baby should be moving that fast. Formula One drivers receive more training before operating vehicles. 34. Early electric blankets. Electric blankets promised warm, cozy nights during cold winters, and when they worked properly, they delivered exactly that. The issue was the phrase, when they worked properly. Early models sometimes suffered from faulty wiring, overheating problems, damaged insulation, and electrical failures. Which is slightly concerning when the product spends 8 hours directly under a sleeping human. Imagine buying a blanket whose secondary function is amateur electrical engineering. Advertisements focused on comfort. They rarely highlighted the possibility of turning bedtime into an unexpected emergency. The technology was relatively new, and manufacturers were still learning important lessons about safety. Unfortunately, some customers helped teach those lessons the hard way. To be fair, electric blankets improved dramatically over time. Modern versions include multiple safety systems and automatic shutoffs. Earlier models occasionally operated under the philosophy that overheating was merely enthusiastic performance. It's difficult to relax completely when the thing keeping you warm also has access to electricity and questionable decision-making skills. 35. Chemistry-based hair relaxers. For decades, certain hair straightening and relaxing products contained incredibly strong chemicals. The goal was simple: transform curly or textured hair into a straighter style. The process, however, sometimes resembled a controlled laboratory experiment. Some formulas contained substances powerful enough to cause burns if used incorrectly. Consumers routinely applied these chemicals directly to their scalps. Think about how strange that sounds. Most people panic when shampoo gets in their eyes. Meanwhile, entire industries were built around products that occasionally came with warnings resembling instructions for handling industrial materials. The advertisements showed glamorous transformations and smiling models. They rarely featured the sentence, "Please do not treat this like ordinary conditioner." Many users achieved exactly the results they wanted. Others learned that beauty products and chemistry sets were occasionally closer cousins than anyone admitted. The story isn't really about hairstyles. It's about humanity's endless willingness to apply increasingly powerful substances to ourselves in pursuit of looking slightly better in photographs. Sometimes fashion doesn't ask for sacrifice. Sometimes it asks for protective gloves. 36. Home pregnancy tests containing hazardous chemicals. Today, home pregnancy tests are simple. You use them, wait a few minutes, and get your answer. Early versions were considerably less user-friendly. In the 1960s and early 1970s, some home testing kits required users to handle chemical reagents, test tubes, droppers, and instructions that looked suspiciously similar to a college laboratory assignment. The process wasn't dangerous in the sense that it exploded. But consumers were expected to work with chemicals that absolutely weren't intended for casual misuse. Imagine finding out whether you're pregnant by performing what looked like an audition for a chemistry professor position. The average bathroom briefly became a scientific research facility. One wrong step, and you'd have questions about the experiment instead of the result. Advertisements promoted convenience, but convenience is a relative term. If your test kit requires glassware and chemicals with warning labels, you've drifted pretty far from convenience. Modern tests provide answers with incredible simplicity. Earlier versions expected consumers to become temporary laboratory technicians. It's one of those moments where technology improved dramatically, and nobody misses the old method. Some products become nostalgic. Chemical pregnancy experiments do not. 37. Paint-containing CB chemicals. For decades, various industrial paints, coatings, and construction materials contained compounds known as PCBs. Manufacturers loved them. They were durable, heat-resistant, and incredibly effective. Unfortunately, they were also incredibly persistent environmental pollutants. The strange thing is that nobody intentionally created a dangerous product. Engineers were solving practical problems. The problem was that the solution refused to stay where it was supposed to. PCBs lingered in buildings, factories, schools, waterways, and ecosystems for years. Imagine inventing a paint so durable that even nature struggles to get rid of it. That's not a coating. That's a curse with excellent adhesion. Workers applied these materials without fully understanding their long-term consequences. Consumers lived around them for decades. The product succeeded so well at its intended purpose that it accidentally became an environmental nightmare. There is something almost poetic about humanity's most dangerous products. Many weren't failures. They worked perfectly. Sometimes the real problem is a product that's a little too good at what it does. 38. Tiny, powerful magnets in children's toys. Magnets seem harmless. They're fun, educational, great for science demonstrations and refrigerator art. Then manufacturers started placing extremely powerful tiny magnets inside toys aimed at children. That's when things became complicated. The magnets themselves weren't the issue. The problem occurred when children swallowed more than one. Inside the body, the magnets could attract each other through intestinal walls, causing severe injuries that often required surgery. It's one of those hazards that sounds so bizarre nobody would predict it. Imagine explaining this to someone. So, the toy is dangerous? No. The magnet is dangerous? Not exactly. Then what's dangerous? The magnet meeting another magnet several hours later. The danger wasn't obvious, which made it particularly alarming. Parents worried about choking hazards. Very few were worried about miniature magnetic engineering projects happening internally. Eventually, regulations tightened and many products disappeared from shelves. The lesson was simple. If your toy requires emergency surgeons to understand advanced magnetism, perhaps the design needs another meeting. 39. Early fiberglass insulation kits. Fiberglass insulation revolutionized construction. It improved energy efficiency, reduced heating costs, and became incredibly popular. It also turned countless homeowners into unwilling participants in the world's itchiest experience. Early do-it-yourself insulation kits encouraged ordinary people to install fiberglass themselves. Protective equipment was often minimal. Instructions occasionally treated microscopic glass fibers like a minor inconvenience. Anyone who handled the material quickly learned otherwise. The fibers irritated skin, eyes, noses, throats, and pretty much every body part capable of registering discomfort. Imagine opening a product that immediately begins negotiating with your nervous system. Homeowners climbed into attics thinking they were saving money. Hours later, they emerged looking like they'd lost a fight with an invisible cactus. The insulation itself wasn't malicious. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. Unfortunately, so did the fibers. Modern safety recommendations emphasize masks, gloves, eye protection, and proper clothing. Back then, many people discovered those precautions through direct personal experience. Nothing motivates workplace safety quite like spending 3 days scratching places you didn't know could itch. 40. Disposable contact lenses. Before strict regulations, contact lenses seem ordinary today. Millions of people wear them safely every day. Earlier generations experienced something closer to the experimental phase of eye accessories. Some early disposable lens products entered markets before modern standards became as rigorous as they are today. Manufacturing consistency varied. Instructions weren't always clear, and consumers occasionally treated medical devices with the same care they gave sandwich bags. The result was predictable. Eye irritation, infections, and complications became common enough to attract attention. Imagine taking one of the most sensitive organs in the human body and saying, "Let's figure this out as we go." That's essentially what happened. Many users loved the convenience. Others discovered that eyeballs are surprisingly unforgiving quality control inspectors. The industry improved dramatically over time. Materials became safer, manufacturing became more consistent, regulations became stricter. But there was a period when putting tiny plastic discs directly onto your eyes involved a level of confidence that modern consumers rarely appreciate. Humanity has always embraced innovation, especially when innovation sits directly on the cornea. 41. Children's darts with metal tips. Apparently, lawn darts weren't enough. Manufacturers also produced numerous dart games marketed toward children that featured genuine metal points. The logic was straightforward. Real darts worked well for adults. Children would surely be equally responsible. History immediately disagreed. Kids transformed bedrooms, basements, garages, and recreation rooms into competitive arenas where sharp metal objects flew through the air at impressive speeds. What could possibly go wrong? Everything. Walls developed new ventilation systems. Furniture acquired unexpected decorations. Siblings discovered fresh reasons to file complaints. And occasionally, emergency rooms gained fascinating stories. The remarkable thing is how ordinary these games seemed. Parents bought them without hesitation. They sat next to board games and puzzles as if they belonged in exactly the same category. One activity involved spelling words, the other involved weaponized accuracy. Eventually, safety standards improved, softer materials appeared, and sharp points became less common in children's products. But for years, family entertainment included a surprisingly strong emphasis on projectile management. Nothing says quality bonding time like trusting your brother's aim. 42. Early home laser devices. Lasers have always fascinated people. The moment consumers heard the word, they immediately wanted lasers in everything. Manufacturers happily obliged. By the 1980s and 1990s, various consumer laser gadgets began appearing in stores. Some promised scientific learning, others focused on entertainment. A few simply existed because laser sounded futuristic enough to sell. The trouble was that safety standards were still evolving. Some products delivered stronger beams than consumers expected. Others came with warnings that seemed oddly casual considering the technology involved. Children pointed them at mirrors. Teenagers experimented with them. Adults ignored instructions. In other words, exactly what every engineer feared. Imagine inventing concentrated light powerful enough to damage vision, then selling simplified versions to people whose favorite hobby is pressing random buttons. The potential for poor decisions was practically built into the packaging. Most products were used safely, but enough incidents occurred to encourage stricter rules and better consumer education. The laser wasn't the problem. Human curiosity was. And if history has taught us anything, it's that humans will absolutely look directly at the thing labeled "Do not look directly at this thing." 43. Home chemistry. Crystal growing kits. Growing crystals sounds like one of the safest hobbies imaginable. You mix a few ingredients, wait patiently, and watch colorful structures appear like tiny geological miracles. Simple, relaxing, educational. At least that's how the box described it. Some older crystal-growing kits, however, included chemicals that required considerably more caution than their cheerful packaging suggested. Certain compounds could irritate skin, stain surfaces permanently, or create problems if handled carelessly. Children would dump powders into containers with the confidence of Nobel Prize winners despite having read approximately 12% of the instructions. Imagine a kid in 1978 wearing no gloves, no goggles, and no concern whatsoever while conducting what was technically a chemical experiment on the family dining room table. The crystal itself wasn't dangerous. The journey getting there occasionally was. Parents often learned this when mysterious blue stains appeared on furniture that would remain visible until the end of recorded history. The kits inspired curiosity and introduced many children to science. They also introduced many parents to the phrase, "What exactly did you spill in here?" Nothing says educational entertainment quite like accidentally redecorating the kitchen with chemistry. 44. Home asbestos repair. Kits asbestos wasn't just in insulation and fake snow. For years, companies sold products specifically designed to help homeowners repair materials that contained asbestos. The sales pitch was wonderfully straightforward. Your house contains a hazardous material? Great news! Here's more of it. Roof repair kits, pipe insulation products, wall materials, and patching compounds often contained asbestos because it was durable, fire-resistant, and inexpensive. At the time, those qualities seemed fantastic. The health consequences weren't fully appreciated by the average consumer. Imagine spending a Saturday afternoon enthusiastically patching your basement while unknowingly handling something future generations would treat like radioactive treasure. The advertisements focused on durability. Nobody was saying this repair may outlive you in multiple ways. The truly incredible part is that these products were marketed directly to regular homeowners. No specialized training, no protective suits, just a bucket of hazardous material and a can-do attitude. Eventually, regulations caught up, and asbestos became one of history's most infamous building materials. But for decades, DIY home improvement involved substances that modern contractors would approach wearing enough protective gear to invade a small country. 45. Early gas-powered children's mini-bikes. At some point, adults looked at motorcycles and thought, these should definitely be smaller and operated by children. Thus, mini-bikes exploded in popularity. These machines were fast enough to feel thrilling, simple enough for kids to operate, and often lacked many of the safety features we'd expect today. No speed governors, minimal protective equipment, questionable brakes, maximum confidence, the perfect combination. A child could be riding a bicycle one weekend and tearing across a field on a gasoline-powered machine the next, because apparently there was no middle step. Imagine being a parent in 1972. Honey, what did you buy little Billy? A motorcycle. He's 9. Exactly. He's got quick reflexes. Manufacturers marketed mini bikes as freedom, adventure, and outdoor fun. Emergency rooms occasionally marketed them as repeat customers. To be fair, many kids rode them safely and created fantastic memories. But looking back, it's remarkable how casually society accepted the idea of giving elementary school students motorized vehicles and hoping maturity would catch up later. Sometimes childhood freedom came with handlebars and very optimistic assumptions. 46. Home mercury science experiments. If there is one recurring theme in product safety history, it's humanity's bizarre confidence around mercury. For decades, educational science kits included experiments involving actual mercury. Not pictures of mercury, not videos, actual mercury. Students could watch it flow, divide into tiny beads, and behave unlike any other metal they'd ever seen. Teachers loved it. Kids were fascinated by it. Safety experts from the future would have been screaming into pillows. Imagine opening a science kit and discovering a substance that modern schools would treat like a hazardous incident report. Children rolled mercury across desks, touched it, transferred it between containers, and generally interacted with it far more casually than anyone would recommend today. The material looked harmless. That's what made it so deceptive. It wasn't explosive, it wasn't dramatic, it simply sat there being toxic with extraordinary patience. The experiments inspired countless future scientists. They also inspired countless future safety regulations. It's one of the few educational tools that successfully taught chemistry while simultaneously demonstrating why safety standards exist. 47. Early consumer fireworks kits. As if regular fireworks weren't exciting enough, some companies decided consumers should build their own, because apparently pre-made explosions lacked personalization. Various hobby kits allowed people to assemble or modify fireworks at home using chemical components and detailed instructions. The idea was educational. The reality often involved enthusiastic amateurs discovering the difference between theory and practice. Imagine giving a teenager a chemistry set and saying, "Today's lesson is controlled explosions." What could possibly go wrong? The answer was usually loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Many hobbyists followed instructions carefully and created impressive displays. Others skipped steps, improvised ingredients, or decided safety recommendations were merely creative suggestions. History repeatedly demonstrates that humans love two things: shortcuts and explosions. Combining those passions rarely produces ideal outcomes. Eventually, regulations became stricter, and many of these products disappeared. But for a fascinating period, consumers could purchase the ingredients for amateur pyrotechnics almost as casually as buying gardening supplies. Nothing captures human optimism quite like building your own fireworks and assuming you'll definitely get the math right. 48. Thorotrast, the medical product that became a horror story. If we're ending this list, we need a grand champion. A product so unbelievably dangerous that it sounds fictional. Meet Thorotrast. During the early 20th century, doctors used it as a contrast agent for certain medical imaging procedures. The product contained radioactive thorium. At first, it seemed incredibly useful. Patients received injections, scans were completed, and everything appeared successful. The problem was that thorium doesn't simply disappear. It stays, for years, for decades, inside the body. Scientists eventually discovered that Thorotrast dramatically increased the risk of severe illnesses long after treatment. Patients who thought they were receiving cutting-edge medicine were unknowingly carrying radioactive material for the rest of their lives. Imagine the confidence required to inject radioactive substances into people and assume future generations would figure out the details later. To be fair, medical science was advancing rapidly, and many researchers genuinely believed they were helping patients. But Thorotrast became one of the most infamous examples of unintended consequences in medical history. And that's what makes it the perfect finale. Because after radioactive toys, explosive games, poisonous wallpaper, and gasoline seasoned with lead, humanity somehow looked at radioactive injections and said, yes, this seems like a completely reasonable idea. 49. Refrigerator doors. That could trap children. Modern refrigerators have magnetic seals that pop open with minimal effort. Older refrigerators had a very different personality. Many models used heavy mechanical latches that locked tightly from the outside, great for keeping food cold, less great for anyone trapped inside. And children, being children, frequently turned discarded refrigerators into forts, hideouts, spaceships, castles, pirate ships, and every other structure imaginable. The problem was that once inside, opening the door wasn't always easy. Imagine creating a product that accidentally doubles as an escape room with extremely high stakes. Entire public safety campaigns eventually emerged to warn families about abandoned refrigerators. Communities organized removal programs, laws changed, designs improved. But for years, giant metal boxes sat behind garages waiting for curious kids and terrible decisions to meet. The refrigerator itself wasn't trying to be dangerous. It was simply designed before engineers fully appreciated one important fact. If there's a confined space anywhere on Earth, a child will eventually climb inside it. Nothing motivates product redesign quite like realizing your appliance is accidentally auditioning for a horror movie. 50. Early trampolines with almost no safety. Features trampolines have always been marketed as family fun. And they absolutely are, right up until gravity remembers its job. Early backyard trampolines often lacked safety nets, protective padding, enclosure systems, warning labels, or any meaningful acknowledgement that humans aren't naturally designed to fly. The setup was simple, a giant spring-loaded launching platform. What could possibly go wrong? Children quickly discovered that trampolines weren't just for jumping. They were for double-bouncing cousins into low Earth orbit. Entire family gatherings became unofficial physics demonstrations. One kid bounced, another kid achieved temporary aviation. The remarkable thing is how normal this seemed. Parents stood nearby holding lemonade while increasingly ambitious stunts unfolded before their eyes. Nobody was wearing helmets. Nobody had a plan. Everyone assumed things would somehow work out. Modern trampolines include extensive safety features. Earlier models operated under a much simpler philosophy. Good luck and try not to land in the neighbor's birdbath. 51. Toy caps and mini explosives. Long before smartphones existed, children entertained themselves by setting off tiny explosions. Toy cap guns were wildly popular. Small paper or plastic strips contained miniature explosive compounds that produced loud bangs when struck. Kids loved them. Parents tolerated them. Dogs absolutely hated them. The products themselves weren't inherently catastrophic, but they normalized a fascinating concept, giving children recreational explosives. Imagine a toy company brainstorming. What do kids enjoy? Noise. Excellent. Let's add gunpowder. Entire neighborhoods echoed with popping sounds every summer afternoon. Children carried enough caps in their pockets to concern modern airport security. Most of the time, everything was harmless. Occasionally burns, eye injuries, or accidents reminded everyone that explosions, even tiny ones, still obey the laws of physics. The best part is that adults treated this as perfectly normal. A generation grew up carrying miniature detonations everywhere and somehow considered it wholesome childhood entertainment. History is weird. Sometimes nostalgia is just remembering dangerous things fondly enough to forget the dangerous part. 52. Radioactive health spas. When people discovered radiation, they immediately reached a completely reasonable conclusion. We should relax in it. Across parts of America and Europe, radioactive health spas became fashionable attractions. Guests soaked in mineral waters containing radioactive elements and paid premium prices for the experience. The marketing promised energy, vitality, rejuvenation, and improved health. Because apparently every scientific discovery eventually becomes a wellness trend. Imagine arriving at a luxury resort. The brochure says the water contains radiation. Instead of leaving immediately, you pay extra. The belief was simple. If tiny amounts of radiation seemed scientific, they must be beneficial. By that logic, standing next to a power plant should count as cardio. Visitors happily soaked in radioactive baths while discussing health benefits that largely existed in advertisements rather than reality. Eventually, science provided clearer answers. The spa industry quietly reconsidered its enthusiasm for radioactive leisure activities. But for a fascinating period, wealthy people voluntarily traveled long distances to sit in mildly radioactive water and call it self-care. Human beings will try absolutely anything if it's marketed as wellness. 53. Dangerous sleep medications sold over the counter. Today's sleep aids come with dosage instructions, warnings, safety studies, and enough paperwork to impress a lawyer. Earlier generations enjoyed considerably less oversight. Various sleep remedies contained ingredients that were powerful, poorly understood, or dangerously easy to misuse. The advertising was wonderfully optimistic. Can't sleep? Take this. Problem solved. The advertisements rarely mentioned that some users woke up feeling like they'd been tranquilized by a veterinarian. Imagine buying medicine from a cheerful newspaper ad promising restful sleep while conveniently omitting the phrase questionable pharmacology. Consumers trusted the products because they were sold openly. After all, if it's on a store shelf, surely somebody checked it first. History repeatedly demonstrates that this assumption can be wildly optimistic. Many products worked, some worked too well, others worked in ways nobody fully understood. The result was a golden age of sleep medicine, where scientific confidence often exceeded scientific knowledge. Nothing says good night's sleep quite like discovering your medication was essentially a chemistry experiment with branding. 54. Early space heaters that loved fire. Almost as much as heat space heaters solve a simple problem. You want warmth without heating an entire building. Early models occasionally solved a second problem too: how to start a fire unexpectedly. Many older heaters lacked modern safety systems like automatic shutoffs, tip-over protection, temperature sensors, and advanced insulation. The machines generated impressive amounts of heat. Sometimes they generated impressive amounts of excitement for local firefighters as well. Imagine owning an appliance whose operating instructions basically translated to, "Please supervise this constantly." Families positioned heaters near curtains, carpets, furniture, newspapers, pets, and every other thing modern safety manuals specifically mention, because nobody knew better, or because people are people. The danger wasn't necessarily the heater itself. It was the combination of heat, flammable materials, and human optimism, a trio that has rarely worked well together. Modern space heaters are vastly safer. Earlier versions occasionally behaved like tiny metal dragons rented by the hour. They kept millions warm. They also kept insurance companies extremely interested. 55. Miracle weight loss products containing amphetamines. If there is one thing humans love, it's a shortcut. And few shortcuts have been marketed more aggressively than weight loss products. During parts of the 20th century, numerous diet pills contained amphetamines or amphetamine-like stimulants. The logic was simple. These substances suppressed appetite and increased energy. People lost weight. Success. Well, temporarily. Advertisements presented these pills as glamorous lifestyle upgrades. Take a tablet, become thinner, look fabulous. No mention that your heart might suddenly be participating in a drum solo. Imagine a doctor saying, "Here's a product that will help you eat less." And neglecting to mention you'll also reorganize your garage at 3 a.m. and feel like you've consumed 17 cups of coffee. Millions of people used these products because they appeared modern, scientific, and effective, which, in fairness, they often were. The problem was everything else. Dependence issues, health risks, and long-term consequences eventually forced regulators to intervene. And that's the perfect final lesson for this entire list. Again and again, dangerous products became popular because they offered something people desperately wanted: beauty, convenience, health, fun, speed, comfort, or success. The danger was rarely hidden behind evil intentions. More often, it was hidden behind marketing, optimism, and humanity's eternal belief that this time the shortcut will definitely work out. 56. Disposable razor blades sold without safety packaging. Today, buying razor blades feels like purchasing classified government documents. They're locked behind glass, sealed in plastic, wrapped in cardboard, and protected by enough packaging to survive re-entry from space. Earlier generations enjoyed a much simpler system. You could buy loose razor blades in small paper envelopes with minimal protection. Sometimes they rattled around in medicine cabinets, bathroom drawers, glove compartments, and travel bags like tiny metallic landmines waiting for human fingers. The logic was straightforward. Everyone knows razor blades are sharp. What could possibly go wrong? Quite a lot, as it turns out. Imagine reaching into a bathroom drawer looking for aspirin and accidentally discovering an extremely aggressive shaving accessory. Entire generations developed reflexes worthy of professional bomb disposal experts. The blades weren't defective. They worked perfectly. In fact, they worked a little too perfectly. Modern packaging often feels excessive until you remember that previous safety measures basically consisted of try not to grab the sharp part. Humanity has learned many lessons over the years. Apparently, one of them was that tiny knives deserve their own security system. 57. Early pressure cookers. Pressure cookers are wonderful kitchen tools. They save time, preserve flavor, and make cooking incredibly efficient. Modern versions are equipped with backup valves, locking mechanisms, pressure indicators, and enough safety features to calm a nervous engineer. Early models? Let's just say they had a more adventurous spirit. The concept itself is simple: trap steam under pressure and cook food faster. The problem occurs when pressure decides it no longer wishes to remain trapped. Some older cookers lack the sophisticated safeguards we take for granted today. Blocked vents, faulty seals, or user mistakes occasionally transformed dinner preparation into an unexpected special effects demonstration. Imagine trying to make beef stew while operating something that sounds increasingly like a submarine under attack. Every whistle became a negotiation. Every hiss inspired fresh prayers. To be fair, millions of meals were prepared safely, but the reputation stuck. For decades, pressure cookers occupied a strange place in household culture. Part kitchen appliance, part mechanical suspense thriller. Nothing spices up a family dinner quite like wondering whether the mashed potatoes are approaching escape velocity. 58. Early electric hair curlers. Beauty has always demanded sacrifice. Sometimes that sacrifice was time, sometimes money, and occasionally it was a small amount of scalp. Early electric curling devices promised glamorous hairstyles with modern technology. Unfortunately, the phrase modern technology occasionally translated to very hot metal placed dangerously close to your face. Temperature controls were often inconsistent. Insulation was sometimes questionable, and warning labels were nowhere near as dramatic as they should have been. Imagine waking up before work and immediately entering a relationship with a heated metal cylinder. What could possibly go wrong? Burns became common enough that many women viewed them as an unofficial part of the styling process. Beauty magazines focused on curls. Emergency rooms occasionally focused on foreheads. The remarkable thing is that people kept using them because nothing, not physics, electricity, or common sense, has ever stood between humanity and the promise of better hair. Modern styling tools are vastly safer. Earlier versions occasionally felt like they were designed by someone who believed beauty and electrical engineering should meet without supervision. 59. DIY home electrical kits. At some point in the 20th century, companies decided homeowners should perform their own electrical work, not small repairs, actual wiring projects. Entire kits were sold containing instructions, tools, and components designed to help ordinary consumers bring electricity into various corners of their homes. The optimism was breathtaking. Imagine handing someone a booklet and saying, "Good luck modifying the invisible force that can stop your heart." The average homeowner approached these projects with confidence, determination, and a deeply concerning lack of formal training. Many projects worked perfectly. Others created fascinating new relationships between walls and fire departments. The problem wasn't electricity. Electricity is remarkably predictable. The problem was humans. Humans are not, especially when instructions include phrases like "connect these wires," and people immediately begin improvising. DIY culture built countless homes and saved families money. But there was definitely a period when some hardware stores appeared one enthusiastic customer away from creating neighborhood-wide blackouts. Nothing says self-reliance quite like learning electrical safety through personal experience. 60. Glass baby bottles. That shattered easily. Before plastic became common, many baby bottles were made entirely from glass, which sounds elegant, until you remember the target audience: babies, the one group least likely to handle fragile objects responsibly. Parents dropped them, babies threw them, tables rejected them, floors defeated them. Glass bottles shattered with surprising enthusiasm, creating exactly the combination you don't want around infants: sharp fragments and panic. Imagine designing a feeding device for someone who lacks motor skills, coordination, judgment, and respect for gravity, then making it out of breakable glass. The truly amazing part is how normal this seemed. Millions of families used them daily. Most survived without incident. But accidents happened often enough that alternatives became increasingly attractive. Plastic bottles eventually offered durability, convenience, and dramatically fewer opportunities for emergency sweeping. The old glass bottles looked beautiful. Unfortunately, broken glass rarely improves the feeding experience. Sometimes technological progress is complicated. Sometimes it's simply inventing baby products that don't explode into shards when dropped. 61. Toy chemistry smoke bomb kits. Kids have always loved science. They've also always loved explosions. Certain toy manufacturers saw no reason to force children to choose. Some chemistry kits included experiments that allowed users to create smoke effects, miniature combustion reactions, or dramatic visual displays. The intention was educational. The outcome depended heavily on whether the child followed instructions. History suggests that was an optimistic assumption. Imagine a 12-year-old reading a science manual. Now imagine that same 12-year-old skipping directly to the part involving smoke. Exactly. Many experiments were relatively safe when performed correctly. The challenge was that children possess a supernatural ability to improve things that don't need improvement. A recommended quantity becomes a suggestion. A safety precaution becomes optional. A controlled experiment becomes a fascinating conversation with the fire extinguisher. The kits inspired curiosity and introduced countless children to chemistry. They also introduced countless parents to the sentence, "Please explain why the garage smells like a military exercise." Educational toys are wonderful, but adding smoke to the equation tends to attract exactly the kind of attention nobody wanted. 62. Liquid nicotine insecticides. If you want a perfect example of how strange product history can be, consider nicotine-based insecticides. Long before modern pest control products dominated the market, farmers and homeowners used concentrated nicotine solutions to kill insects, and they worked remarkably well. Which shouldn't be surprising. Nicotine is toxic. That's literally why it worked. The strange part is how casually these products were sometimes handled. Imagine carrying around bottles of concentrated poison while treating them with the same caution people use for window cleaner. Protective equipment wasn't always emphasized, instructions weren't always detailed, and consumers often underestimated the risks because the product came from tobacco. For some reason, people hear plant-based and immediately assume safety. Nature, meanwhile, has spent millions of years inventing highly effective poisons. The insecticides accomplished their mission brilliantly. Unfortunately, they could also be hazardous to humans if mishandled. It's the perfect ending to another chapter in dangerous product history. A substance designed to kill living creatures was sold to ordinary consumers, who confidently thought, "How dangerous could it be?" History's answer is almost always the same: much more dangerous than anyone expected. 63. Disposable medical syringes. Before modern standards today, medical syringes arrive in sterile packaging that looks like it was designed by people with trust issues. Every seal is inspected, every component is tested, Every package practically screams, "Please don't contaminate me." Earlier generations had a much rougher experience. Some disposable syringes from the early days of mass production lacked the quality control systems we take for granted today. Manufacturing inconsistencies, storage issues, and varying standards sometimes created risks that modern medicine would never tolerate. Imagine being excited about a product specifically because it was disposable. That alone tells you how complicated things had been before. Doctors and patients welcomed the convenience. The healthcare industry wanted faster, cheaper, and more accessible solutions. Unfortunately, innovation occasionally outran regulation. It's a recurring theme in product history. Everyone gets excited about the future before anyone reads the instruction manual. Most syringes worked exactly as intended, but the few that didn't helped inspire stricter manufacturing requirements that transformed modern medicine. Sometimes progress comes from brilliant inventions. Sometimes it comes from discovering all the ways a brilliant invention can accidentally go wrong. 64. Carbon tetrachloride cleaning products. There was a time when cleaning products weren't judged by safety. They were judged by enthusiasm, and few products cleaned more enthusiastically than carbon tetrachloride. This chemical appeared in household cleaners, stain removers, degreasers, and various miracle products that promised to make dirt disappear. The dirt disappeared. Unfortunately, users occasionally felt like disappearing too. The vapors could be extremely dangerous, especially in poorly ventilated spaces. Imagine cleaning your kitchen with a product powerful enough to remove grease, stains, and your desire to remain conscious. Advertisements focused entirely on cleaning performance. Nobody was starring in commercials saying, "Please open a window before attacking the bathtub." Back then, consumers often assumed that if a product smelled powerful, it must be working. By that logic, a dragon would be the perfect cleaning assistant. Eventually, health concerns became impossible to ignore. Safer alternatives replaced many of these products. But for years, household cleaning involved chemicals that approached every stain with the energy of a military operation. The grime never stood a chance, neither did common sense. 65. Early roller coasters with minimal restraints. Modern roller coasters look like engineering masterpieces, multiple harnesses, computer monitoring, advanced braking systems, seat restraints strong enough to survive an alien invasion. Earlier coasters were built with a much simpler philosophy. Sit down and try your best. Many early rides relied on lap bars, basic restraints, or in some cases, what appeared to be optimism secured with bolts. The rides were thrilling. The safety margins occasionally felt negotiable. Imagine climbing aboard a wooden roller coaster in 1915. The operator checks the bar. The ride creaks ominously. Everyone smiles nervously. Then gravity takes over. To be fair, many early roller coasters operated safely for years, but standards evolved because people gradually realized passengers preferred remaining inside the ride for the entire duration, a surprisingly reasonable request. The fascinating part is that people loved these attractions despite the risks. Fear was part of the experience, sometimes a little too much fear. The modern amusement park industry exists partly because earlier generations spent decades discovering which safety features were absolutely necessary, usually the hard way. 66. Early scuba equipment for recreational divers. Scuba diving is one of humanity's most impressive hobbies. We've essentially decided that walking around underwater sounds fun. Early recreational scuba gear made this adventure significantly more exciting than necessary. Equipment standards varied wildly. Training requirements were inconsistent. Some divers learned techniques through clubs, magazines, or enthusiastic friends who were only slightly more experienced than they were. Imagine deciding to explore an environment specifically designed to prevent human survival while operating equipment still going through its developmental phase. What could possibly go wrong? The answer included equipment malfunctions, air supply mistakes, and countless stories beginning with the phrase, "I thought I knew what I was doing." Modern diving certifications emphasize safety, planning, and redundancy. Early diving culture sometimes emphasized confidence. History repeatedly demonstrates that confidence is not a life support system. Despite the risks, recreational diving grew rapidly because the underwater world is genuinely incredible. People were willing to accept remarkable levels of danger just to swim next to fish and look at shipwrecks. Human curiosity is powerful, sometimes more powerful than common sense. 67. Children's chemistry firework crystals. As we approach the end of this list, let's revisit one of humanity's favorite hobbies, giving children access to chemistry. Certain novelty kits allowed kids to grow crystals, create colorful reactions, and occasionally produce effects that looked suspiciously close to pyrotechnics. Manufacturers described them as educational. Parents described them as, "Why is there smoke coming from the garage?" The products were designed to spark interest in science. Mission accomplished, sometimes literally. Imagine opening a birthday gift and discovering enough chemical compounds to make your science teacher visibly nervous. Children approach these kits with enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is wonderful. It's also a terrible substitute for laboratory training. Most experiments worked exactly as intended. The challenge was that children rarely stop at the intended version. They immediately ask the most dangerous question in human history. What happens if I add more? Entire industries exist because someone once asked that question. Entire safety regulations exist for exactly the same reason. Educational toys are fantastic, but occasionally they blur the line between science lesson and insurance claim. 68. Radium watches and glow-in-the-dark products. People love things that glow. Stars glow, neon signs glow, glow sticks glow. At some point, manufacturers looked at radioactive materials and thought, those glow too. For years, radium appeared in watch dials, clocks, instrument panels, and novelty products because it created a self-illuminating glow that worked beautifully in the dark. The effect was incredible. The health consequences were less incredible. Workers painting these dials often handled radioactive materials far more closely than anyone would permit today. Consumers wore the products daily, fascinated by technology that seemed almost magical. Imagine owning a watch that glows forever. That's impressive. It's significantly less impressive when you discover why. The remarkable thing is how futuristic the product seemed. People associated radioactivity with progress, science, and the future. Nobody wanted to hear boring warnings when the future was glowing so beautifully. Eventually, reality intervened. Safety standards changed, materials improved, and society collectively decided that watches should tell time without involving radioactive elements, a surprisingly sensible compromise. 69. The Therac 25. When software became the danger. For our final entry, we need something truly unforgettable. Not a toy, not a beauty product, not a questionable household appliance, a machine that revealed an entirely new category of risk. The Therac 25 was a medical radiation therapy machine used in the 1980s. Unlike many products on this list, its danger didn't come from explosive chemicals, toxic paint, or sharp metal parts. It came from software. Programming errors and design flaws contributed to a series of catastrophic accidents that delivered massive radiation overdoses to patients. Think about that for a moment. For thousands of years, humanity worried about dangerous materials. Then computers arrived and introduced an entirely new way for things to go wrong. The machine represented cutting-edge technology. Hospitals trusted it. Patients trusted it, engineers trusted it, and that trust turned out to be misplaced. The Therac 25 became a landmark case in engineering ethics and software safety. It changed how people thought about technology forever, because if this entire list teaches one lesson, it's this. The most dangerous products aren't always the ones that look dangerous. Sometimes they're the ones that look perfectly modern, perfectly intelligent, and perfectly safe, right up until they aren't.